studies. I am going to be discussing a qualitative study just so we can kind of shift gears and get our head into that space. So my name is Carissa, and I'm a third-year PhD candidate in the College of Kinesiology at the University of Saskatchewan. I'm going to be presenting a research regarding coaches' capacity to support a self-compassion program for competitive women's sport. Generally, we think that sport can offer wonderful experiences with a lot of physical, psychological, and social benefits. With that, however, it can also be challenging, particularly for women athletes. Women athletes face the typical challenges like poor performance, but women also face unique challenges due to the gendered nature of sport. Sport really values these traditionally masculine characteristics, including winning, hierarchy, and competition. And this culture is pervasive. It's evident at all levels, from the individual to within sport organizations and into larger sport systems. For instance, one personal challenge women athletes face related to the masculine culture of sport is concern over body image. Body image concerns could be fueled by the culture of competition and the pressures for women athletes to be feminine for society, yet muscular for their sport. Being competitive women's sport is filled with these unique challenges. It's critical to provide women athletes with tailored resources to manage during times of struggle. Psychological skills training is one avenue of providing women athletes with those resources. There are various categories of psychological skills training programs, including mental imagery, inner dialogue, focusing, biofeedback, and mindfulness-based methods. Mindfulness programming, in particular, has been shown to help improve flow experiences and performance in precision sports like dart throwing or rifle shooting with greater effectiveness than traditional psychological skills programs. A construct that involves being mindful, as well as being kind to oneself and understanding that their challenges are part of the larger human experience, is self-compassion. Again, self-compassion is this kind, understanding way of relating to the self, particularly during challenges. Women can benefit from self-compassion because competitive sport is hard, and self-compassion really shows up during the hard. Further, women athletes tend to have these downward spirals into self-criticism when challenges come up, and self-compassion training helps stop these self-critical spirals, potentially buffering against burnout beyond that of mindfulness alone. Interrupting those self-critical spirals may help athletes learn from their mistakes rather than ruminate on them. Beyond buffering the experience of emotional difficulties, self-compassion is related to greater well-being, striving for excellence, helping competitive women athletes dig deeper and play harder, and find solutions to challenges. It appears to help women athletes have realistic expectations of performance and more accurate performance perceptions as well. Despite some reservations towards fully adopting self-compassion in sport, women athletes generally see it as a valuable resource for when they are faced with challenges. There have been various self-compassion interventions applied with athletes in the research. However, they come with limitations. For instance, many programs are implemented in the NCAA, which limits their applicability to a Canadian competitive women's sports system. In addition, many programs do not note evidence informing implementation choices. I acknowledge that this lack of information could be due to word count when it comes to publishing, but in saying that, much of the sports psychology literature emphasizes men and male athletes. Therefore, any evidence that was potentially informing those programs may not capture nuances of best practices when implementing a program for women athletes. When it comes to creating future programs for women athletes want a say in how they're being structured. I apologize for the formatting. So my colleagues asked, how do women athletes want to learn and practice self-compassion? This study included 7 findings. First of all, the one that you cannot see is that women athletes want a variety of accessible self-compassion resources. In addition, they want to learn self-compassion through multiple interactive, professional-led, progressive group sessions. Sorry, progressive's in the next one. And they want sport-integrated, progressive preseason programming. Women athletes also want to practice self-compassion by setting self-compassion goals before sport, managing their self-talk during sport, and compassionately reflecting on performance after sport. Women athletes also want access to support people like their coach. I know coaches are who you came to listen to, so I'm going to key in on 2 pieces here. One being that sport integration, and 2, being access to support people like their coaches. Coaches generally have power in determining how their team operates, and typically they're also seen as the technical and tactical experts of sport rather than the mental performance expert for their sport. So if women athletes want a sport integrated program with support from their coach, it's critical to explore a coach's capacity to support such a program. Therefore, the purpose of this research was to explore coaches' capacity to support a self-compassion program for competitive women's sport. We took an exploratory case study approach using semi-structured interviews to generate initial data. To analyze the data, we engaged in a reflective thematic analysis, which consists of 5 steps. I was the person who recruited participants and ran interviews to ensure I was familiar with the data. I had some help from research assistants with transcribing the audio. Then I re-listened to the audio files and read the transcripts multiple times. In my multiple read-throughs, this data was coded, and once that data was coded, I looked at patterns to develop those initial themes. To help with reviewing the themes in step 4 and support the credibility of the findings, we invited coaches back to take part in a remember reflection focus group to provide additional insight and clarity on those initial themes. If you're interested in those initial themes, I do have them, I'm happy to share. But final themes were developed by using this focus group data to provide clarity and refine those themes. Participants included 16 coaches of competitive women athletes with at least 3 years of sport experience. They ranged in age from 20 to 55 years with an average age of 37 and a standard deviation of 9.9 years. There were 11 head coaches and 5 assistant coaches with 7 self-identifying as men and 9 as women. Coaches came from a variety of sport backgrounds and ranged from local to international competition levels. From the conversations I had with these coaches, we generated 4 themes. The first theme is that coaches are spread thin. Coaches have a lot on their plates. Lots of coaches are volunteers and have other full-time jobs. For paid coaches, it seems like they just continue to have more and more responsibilities and duties added to their plates. Both groups of coaches share the general sentiment that Andrew summarized succinctly. There's not enough people, there's not enough time, there's not enough money, right? A major concern over integrating a self-compassion program into their sport is that their time and money resources are already limited and they need to be spent wisely. With that, the second theme is that integration needs to be simple and easy and supported by experts and educational resources. If coaches were to be part of the sport support system to assist with integrating self-compassion programming into sport, programming needs to be simple enough for them to help athletes with, being that they're not the self-compassion expert. That leads to part B, where coaches express the need for support themselves and an interest in learning more about how they can support integration. Coaches would benefit from experts in learning how to manage when they become the trusted person for their women athletes. Coaches also want tools and resources. Lori shares, we do want education and support because we're not claiming to be the experts. They want access to educational resources so they can learn more about self-compassion and being in that support role for a sport-integrated self-compassion program. The third theme is supporting athletes within safe sport guidelines. Coaches have the capacity to provide perspective and guidance or just be a listening ear, but coaches are also aware that they need to protect themselves and often refer to safe sport guidelines when choosing how to support women athletes. Within these safe sport guidelines or along those lines, coaches refer to the particular rule of 2, which requires there to be at least 2 adults in the room when they're meeting with a minor or having open door meetings. This theme was particularly prominent for men coaches of minor girl athletes. These coaches want to support the athletes they coach, but they're also hyper aware of all this contextual power dynamic that occurs with age, gender, and their authority position. Coaches tread carefully, not wanting any of their caring actions to be misconstrued as harmful. Bruce shared, I can't tell you how many times I've had a girl, they said something's going on, it's whatever, some of their family, or maybe something personal or whatever, just I'm the person that she trusts in the building, and again, will maybe come in a little bit upset, or just want a hug or something like that, and it's like, I can't. In abiding by some of these safe sport guidelines, coaches are also aware that athletes are less likely to disclose difficult information to them or could break down trust. The fourth theme is taking accountability for team culture. Coaches varied in how aware they were in determining their team culture culture to one that's has a more balanced perspective. Shifting the culture to their team is difficult due to this pervasive sport culture that I talked about earlier. Andrew, as part of the university system, shared they only see the wins, referring to people outside the larger organizations. People care about the wins. At the same time, many coaches agree with Bree, who share it's our job as coaches to make sure that athletes know there's other points of sport than performance on demand. Coaches spoke about how they want a team culture where women athletes don't need mental performance resources or self-compassion training, but they're not really sure of the best way to create it, especially when winning matters in sport. Coaches need confidence that a sport-integrated self-compassion program is worth their limited resources. They want to see data, including statistics and testimonials from other coaches and athletes. Future research may explore the feasibility of implementing a sport-integrated self-compassion programming, including the effectiveness of improving variables such as well-being and performance, as well as include participation experiences while being engaged in the program. In addition, future research may explore the role of key partners in making self-compassion programming more accessible to competitive women's sport. Coaches also need access to education regarding self-compassion and its benefits for competitive women athletes. In the general population, self-compassion is still an emerging construct, and it's often misconstrued as weak or soft, or potentially leading to mediocrity, which is really unwelcome in a space that values winning and domination. Compassion is more complex than just being nurturing and gentle with oneself. So future research may explore the motivational power of self-compassion for competitive women athletes to gain a deeper understanding of how there are different ways to show up in sport and different ways to be a competitive athlete. In conclusion, coaches generally see value in bringing self-compassion into their women's sport, and a sport-integrated self-compassion program needs to support both the athletes and the coaches. Thank you. I also want to acknowledge some of my co-authors in the crowd. I appreciate you coming out and supporting. And if anybody's interested in learning more, here's the time where you pull out your cell phone and scan that QR code. There's more information there. So thank you.
We have time for maybe one or maybe two questions. Okay. Go ahead.
I have a question about how much the coaches understood about self-compassion in your interviews, and how much did you have to, describe it to them, and then also how much they felt they were self-compassionate so that they could then help their athletes be self-compassionate.
Yeah, I think athletes or coaches kind of come from this general population understanding of what self-compassion is. At the same time, I also acknowledge that the coaches who came to me had a baseline understanding of what it was, because my posters would have said, hey, self-compassion, are you interested in self-compassion? Let's talk about it. You end up attracting the people who are interested in it. Yeah. So they had a baseline understanding of it, and I provide them with a definition similar to what I provided here. And they also emphasize that they need more education. They want to understand more. I think that answers your question. Yeah. Oh, and then you asked about their self-compassion.
Yeah, so that's what I'm interested in around like their use of self. I know that wasn't the purpose of this, but did that come up in conversation about their use of it themselves?
That's something that I find interesting, is that there's this disconnect between almost my athletes need to be more self-compassionate, but I'm not sure if coaches are aware that their potential lack of self-compassion makes it difficult for them to be compassionate to their athletes, and then that potentially plays a role in athletes' capacity to show up in a compassionate way as well. Mm-hmm. I think there is a connection between those things, but that was not the purpose of this, but I do think that is an interesting avenue to explore further. Yeah, thank you.
So we'll wrap it up there in the interest of time. Please join me in thanking Carissa and all the rest of the presenters for the excellent session. I do encourage you to continue the conversations, but so that the next